life, I believed, well, I wouldn't say believed, kind of like leaned toward believing in Christ, but, not sure, period. And I say period because I'm so used to talk to text on my phone, okay? So that slips up sometimes. But, so, I didn't, I didn't really, like, agree with all that. I've always had, a big heart, a heart which I wish I didn't have at times, because it seems like all people do is take advantage of you. It's like they take and they take, and when there's nothing left to take, they want to take some more. Um, so, a few years back, I'd always tried. Back in, early 2000s, I started reading a lot of books. I dropped out of high school with a 3.9 GPA. Started reading books, and within like a couple years I had read hundreds and hundreds of books, and I wasn't satisfied with Christ. It seemed like a bunch of BS, because I believed that it was mind control and way to control the masses and whatnot. So I started reading books. I got into, like, listening to Coast to Coast AM, Art Bell, George Norrie, reading books on. I read all of Zechariah Sitchin's books on the Anunnaki, Michael Tellinger, read books by Dan Brown. That's really kind of what got me on this little quest. And, the more I read, and, I read Corso's book, Day After Roswell. So, needless to say, I just went on this journey of reading books about ancient civilizations, and I really got to the point where I believed that aliens were God, and they created us. And this is when it was unpopular, because I would try to tell people, and they'd laugh, and they'd always have something to say, and and I just kind of didn't believe in God as per se Christ. But I'd always talk to Christ. In my head, you always like, well, the voice in my head, I'm talking to God, even though it sounds like me. In my head, isn't me. I always liked drugs back in the day. I don't drink. I don't do drugs now. Haven't in a long time, but sometimes you kind of want to, especially when you deal with ignorant people all the time. So I started believing in this, theory of the gods were aliens. And this is 15 years before it was popular like it is now, mainstream. Fast forward like 2015, I had some kids, I was with a girl, it didn't work out, I was in like the worst pain of my life, to really have your heart really broken. And I pretty much cursed God, not cursed God like with my mouth, but I did use my mouth as well, but my being. Like, I really cursed God with like a hate, and I asked for proof, and I started to really blame God, and start to use drugs, and I was just really going through something. So all of a sudden I'm starting to listen to Esham and Nodis, which is like a group from the early '90s in Detroit. Satanic music I listen to, because back when you're listening to that stuff, you think it's all shock value, which later on down the line I would learn is not just shock value. Anything kind of just defiant. And, all of a sudden, like, I start feeling like I'm sharing my eyes with someone, and I start watching things like by E.A. Ketting, or whatever the guy's name is, big YouTube, whatever you want to call him, a live summoning of the fallen angel Azazel out of nowhere. I'm just starting to listen to this music I haven't listened to for 20 years. Every time I turn around, I'm doing this. Like I'm thinking, I'm throwing the devil horns up, and I just really felt like something was going on. So, this stuff starts to go on, and all of a sudden, like, I'm starting to get paranoid. And when I say paranoid, I don't mean like I think people are out to get me. I think they're talking about me or something. I mean, to the point where you can physically and audibly see and hear people talking about you. I'm starting to see things around the house I was living at, and I lived across the street from, it was a Masonic temple in Welder, Texas, and it's like 50 feet across the street, and just like I'd be outside like at nighttime, 8, 9 o'clock, going for a walk, and I'd see these people that were pulling up to this Masonic temple. They'd be standing outside, and it's like I'd walk by and they would just stop, and I'd be staring at me. And shortly after, sorry, phone call. Shortly after, I'm starting to see things in the house I'm staying at, like shadows and whatnot, and I'm starting to do drugs and stay up, and I see in the dark one night this big, I don't know, 8 or 9 foot tall. It's like blacker than the darkness, like on some like Predator type shit, like where you kind of see like a field, but it's like, and it was like pitch blackness, man, and I can just feel like this. It's hard to describe, man. I thought it'd be easier to talk about, but I tend to jump here and there sometimes, but I'll make a point of it. It's got a hood. This thing's like, 4 foot wide, 8 or 9 foot tall, and it's kind of just floating around the room, right? I know what you're going to say, well, drugs do that, blah, blah, blah. And, I kind of played it off to that too, but then, like, holidays would come around, I'd be by myself at the house, and, I'd have the hall light on and be dark in my room, and I'd start seeing, like, this shadow, like, kind of peeking in, like somebody was standing in the hallway, kind of peeking in and creeping out, and I'm hearing noises in the house and stuff, and, so that's, come on, bro, quit calling me. So that's going on, and I didn't really think too much of it, but other people were kind of noticing like something weird going on with me, like comments I'd make about like, you ever feel like you're sharing your eyes with someone? Because it's kind of what it felt like I was like sharing my eyes with somebody. And so I write music and I write songs and stuff, and I just be up for like days and days, what I'm saying, like writing music, and it's like I could hear the instruments like talking, if that makes sense. And I'd have like visions, I guess, like in my imagination I'd have visions of like these 3 little demons, like, I'm writing a story and I'm envisioning like talking to them, and they're talking to me and stuff I was writing. So I, thought I was like losing my mind. I'm seeing people, hearing people talk about me, I'm getting pissed off, like I'm really getting agitated and angry, like my temper at this point is like raised through the roof, like I'm ready to cut you. Baby mother had cheated on me with some guy, moved my kids in with, and this is what kind of led to me, getting high, a lot, is after all this it went down, and, so like I started looking up, because I'm Native American, and the guy that noticed what was going on with me, he was Native American as well. My great grandmother's full-blooded Cherokee, and on my father's side there's like Comanche and Navajo. And he was Cree Indian. Not really from India, but you know how it goes. So after some time goes by, I'm hanging out with this guy, and he said he was drawn to me because he'd never met somebody like me. I'm a very giving person. I just believe in, like, if I got it and you don't have something, my heart won't let me leave you in that disposition. I'll put myself in a disposition helping you out. And So he starts to notice these things, and he's like playing some Native American music for me, just here and there, and he's like, tell me what you're thinking about when you hear this and this, and I'd start getting sleepy, falling asleep. Well, I guess after that day I told him I felt like I was sharing my eyes with something. That comment that I just kind of made, he took it really seriously. And so, he's trying to get me to stop being, you know, like listening to certain music and stop writing certain music. And, you know, I don't know, man. Like, even like when I was like recording, it would just sound like another person, right? So one day he comes over and he's got his new car and he's like, hey, let's go to the store. And the store's like right around the block. So I'm like, all right, let's start walking. He's like, no, let's drive. And I'm like, whoa, what do you want to drive for? So I get in the car and he turns the radio on and it's like real scratchy. And I'm like, bro, like what the, why, like eventually like you would think somebody would turn it. And it's just, I'm like, turn it, man. I'm like, what's wrong with your radio? He's like, nothing's wrong with my radio. So finally, I hear the music come on and whatever, and it's, it's Native American, it's Cree Indian stomp dance. And so, like, I'm like, we drive to the store, and I'm like guzzling down. At this point, I'm like drinking these like Venom energy drinks of all kind. I'm doing drugs, I'm shitting black, I'm seeing shit, and I think, whatever, So I finally hear the music and okay, so we go in the store. This time I stopped. I didn't get an energy drink because he's like, you gotta stop drinking that, bro. It's satanic shit, blah blah blah. And I don't believe this shit. I'm like, whatever, dude. Let me like just figure it out. So we go to the store. He leaves the music playing. We go out and we get back in, right? And he turns the music up. And I'm listening to stomp dance, and we, get back to the house, and I'm sitting there, and I got my food, my whatever I got from the store. I'm starting to feel like sick to my stomach, and I'm sweating and stuff, and I'm like just really like irritated. And I ask him like, bro, you feel sick at all, man? Maybe it's like, and he's just like, nah. And I want to go in, but he's like, nah, just stay here for a minute. And he turns, music up some more, and we're listening to it. And by this time, dude, I'm starting to like really feel sick, bro. And all of a sudden, I start like like twitching and shit. I'm like, what the fuck, bro? Like I'm feeling this. I'm like, I gotta get out of this car, and I get out, right? And the stomp music's playing. I gotta get out, and he's like, it's in you, bro. And I'm like, dude, like I don't know what it was. I start like fighting for my controlling my body, bro. It feels like I'm getting electrocuted, right? And I go into this house. I'm like literally like feels like I'm like fighting for control of my body. I go inside the house. The one of my roommates, his girlfriend's there, and she sees me, and she like fucking like, and she books and locks the door, and I'm like, no, like I'm not tripping, I'm not high, I'm not gonna hurt you. She's like, I'm not scared of you, Brandon, I'm scared of that thing behind you. I'm like, the fuck, thing behind me? And I look behind me, there's nothing there, but what she saw was, I guess, this shadow that's like connected to my, I turn it, so she's like, in the name of Jesus, she's crying, in the name of Jesus, Brandon, open the door and tell this thing to get out. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I'm like, shaking and shit, like fighting for my body, bro. And in my pocket, I got a 20 of some crystal, like, snorting some crystal meth. I'm selling crystal meth, whatever. And at that point, I just had this flash in my head, like, that's part of it. Because I'm getting my shit from a gang called El Muerte, and they do voodoo over their shit, right? You know what I'm saying? I don't know. They pray to like Santa de la Muerte or whatever. And so I pull this dub out of my pocket and I throw it on the ground, right? And I'm like, hey, flush that. And she's like, what? And she looks, she sees what it is, so she grabs it and she goes to flush it. Bro, I shit you not. It feels like this thing had like long black fingers, and I start feeling like some stabbing sensations and shit, like it's stabbing the shit out of me with these long black fingers, right? And she goes and flushes it, and once I get rid of the crystal, bro, it's like this thing was like really fucking like going at me, like it was pissed. I'm freaking out because I don't know what the fuck's going on. All of a sudden I start like walking backwards to this room, like, walking, like it's like walking me back to this room. And see, this room that we lived in, every roommate that had this room in the past or whatever always had problems in there, like, anger, beating their girlfriends, all kind of just like they've violence, and like anger issues, like. And at this point, every time I try to call and talk to my kids, I get pissed off at my baby mother. It's like I start bitching at her. She hangs up. She won't answer the phone. Like it wouldn't let me talk to my kids. So anyway, I'm walking backwards this room, and she's like, Brandon, don't go in that room, don't. And I'm like, whoa, I realize I'm walking backwards through the doorway to go into this room. And like, so I stop. I get a hold of myself, and I'm being like attacked, bro. And that's when I started like, putting, I'm just like, bro, I'm losing my fucking mind. But I got this girl, and she's like seeing this fucking thing, and I'm, man. So, this goes on for a while, and the thing is, like, anytime I get, like, feel hurt or angry or something, so my Native American friend, he's been telling me, like, this thing's been in you, I didn't believe the shit, like, until, like, this shit started happening to me, and then I started putting things together. I even looked up online about this, like, these little demons and this big hooded, like, Grim Reaper looking, whatever it was, and, like, there's a Native American legend, and it's, like, mentioning this thing usually accompanied with 3 smaller ones, and I'm like, what the So, like, I started crying, because, like, I'm like, this is too wild, man. And so, like, I quit doing, like, drugs or whatever, and, like, I'm just, like, I feel like I was just starting to be flooded with this knowledge and stuff, and, like, so I move away from this house eventually, and I go to, like, I get an apartment, and I'm still, like, going through some shit, I'm thinking I'm crazy. I'm talking to my friends, like, and they're like, bro, you're not crazy. Like, my father gets attacked all the time by demons, or, like, Mexicans take this shit real serious, that, so I'm, like, thought I was losing my mind, and I wasn't. So I speak to another Native American guy that's doing, like, at these apartments I moved to. He's like the caretaker or maintenance guy, whatever. And I start, I just tell him, because I'm very open. I don't give a fuck. You think I'm crazy or whatever, I'll tell you whatever, what I'm saying? So I started, like, talking to him about that, and, whatever, he's like, wow, he believes it because he's Native American, and, Native American people, they very spiritual, especially, like, when it comes to, like, fighting, like, demons or whatever. I don't know, like, what this thing was. All I know is, like, when I was there, I didn't sleep with the lights off for, like, 7 days, bro. That's how terrified I was, and I thought of this prayer, and I don't know where it came from, but it was, basically, like, I prayed to the God of gods, King of kings, he who blows the wind, a mountain in the presence of valleys, the God, the one true God, not the God of this world. And I would start saying this prayer over and over, and, like, I would be filled with sheer terror when this thing was whenever it was around. I would be filled with, like, fucking terror, like a feeling of dread and terror. And finally I could start going to sleep, and, I told a friend about this. He didn't believe me. He laughed until he started seeing it in his car. He was snorting, getting high on drugs and shit too. And so, and then I moved to this apartment, and after I told this maintenance man or whatever, he comes back the next day when he gives me an eagle's feather, for protection, whatever. He's like, do you know those little girls that stay around the side of the, apartment over there? I was like, no, why? He's like, a little 5-year-old, 6-year-old girl. I was like, no, why? He's like, because right after I talked to you that day, these little girls were out here, and they came up to me, and they're like, there's a monster lives up there, and they're pointing to my apartment. And he's like, well, why do you say that? And they had described to him that in broad daylight, they had saw, like, this black shadow, whatever, cutting its own throat, like with 2 knives, I guess, cutting its throat. And then it just flew off. And I'm like, so for all these, and I'm like, what the fuck? So this thing had followed me, whatever, because it was a personal haunting or whatever. I was pretty much demon possessed. And so, like, I'm like, well, shit, obviously this shit's, like, really fucking real. If, like, people that aren't even, like, involved in what's going on with me are seeing shit around me, and I don't even know these little girls, and they're telling this guy, and this, so I had this feather, and, my buddy came over at, like, 3 in the morning and did, like, the egg and was saying the Lord's Prayer, and he's like, while he was doing the Lord's Prayer over me, because I broke down crying, like, bro, I don't know what's going on with me, this is for real. And so he came back like 3 in the morning, knocks on my door, and I answer the door. And he comes in with the egg, and they do like this Lord's Prayer, and he's like, bro, look, he's like I'm laying down, and he's doing this on my back. I got scratch marks all over my back and stuff, and I'm like, wow, you know, probably be more interesting if I could tell this like as a, whatever. I'm just going off the top of the head, so I'll jump around a little bit. And he starts doing Lord's Prayer, and he says like his skin. His hair and his arms are starting to stand up, and he starts forgetting the Lord's Prayer. Like, we're saying it together over and over. And he's like, bro, it don't want me here, and whatever. So, I guess, like, something happened where I was starting to, like, awaken to, like, stuff that goes on. Because, this stuff, like, happens to a lot of people. They're just not aware of it going on with them. They just think it's them. So, all right. Hold on one second.
Okay, I think I'm all done here.
All right, my man.
I got it set on a low temperature because it's not that cold right now.
Right.
The temperature inside the house is 74 right now. I got it drop. I made sure it started dropping. That's why I waited.
Okay.
The temperature dropped. See it jump back to 75.